Greetings to all listeners. This is King Etchu, the radical Pan-African activist from Ambazonia, aka Ambasby. A month ago, if you remember, Biden holds a summit of 49 African leaders, the U.S.-African summit, where he had discussions with the African leaders, particularly about the fact that they wanted African to slow down or stop doing business with China because of the issues that they have with China. After that discussion at the summit of the U.S. African summit, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen visited Africa. That's one of, the U.S. African leaders that's going to be visiting Africa. More leaders are going to be visiting Africa this year. But there's a huge change that is happening, and Africans need to open their eyes. Africans on the continent and Africans globally need to open their eyes in what is happening. Africans are scared of politics because the leaders of Africa makes Africans to be scared of politics. But Africans should not be scared of politics. Africans should understand politics, to be open-minded to politics, to see what is happening, because politics controls our livelihood as Africans, as people of the world. Politics control our livelihood. Politicians are finding a way to blindfold the people with sports. Athletes like LeBron James, all the great athletes that they have there in soccer, in basketball, in whatever sports. So the people's minds are concentrated on sports. And then the politicians, it's like magic. They use one method to blindfold you over here, meanwhile they're doing something over here. So we as Africans need to pay attention to what is happening in politics, especially when it has to do global politics that concerns Africa. You see, so U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen visited Africa after the U.S. African summit, and Joe Biden is supposed to go to Africa. Many other leaders in the United States are supposed to go to Africa. There's a reason why this is happening. Barack Obama urges American companies to invest in Africa or regret losing to China. Why is Barack Obama urging American companies to invest in Africa? The first U.S. African summit happened in 2014 under Barack Obama's watch. And then the second U.S. African summit happened under Biden, and they're trying to invest in Africa. I think it's about 55 billion in the next maybe 3 or 4 years that the U.S. is going to be investing in Africa. It's not free money. Money that they're going to invest, and they're going to make lucrative money out of those investments. And if you look at history, because I want to take you behind history, people don't see what is happening. What is happening now happened in 1970s. This happened in 1970s. But let me explain further, because history is vital and we need to look into history, because it tells us what is going to happen and how it's going to happen. In 1970, after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed in 1968. In 1970, U.S. Deindustrialized Black American states. They took out all the industries, the productive industries that made money, and took them to China. By 1979, the U.S. and China reestablished a diplomatic relationship, and that signaled a bilateral trade agreement. That was 1979, right? And the first money that was late for the trade that was established was 4 billion. They invested 4 billion. That 4 billion turned into 600 billion US dollars. The first investment. I did my research. So US plans to invest 55 billion US dollars across Africa for the next 3 years. Just that 55 billion that they're going to invest in Africa, they're going to get out lucrative sums of money. This is an advantage and also a disadvantage. If you look at it, there's a pros and cons in this decision that they're making. But they're going to make lucrative money just like they have made lucrative money when they took industrialization in when they made the bilateral trade between US and China in 1970. After this deindustrializing the Black America, taking out all the jobs from Black America, they took out those industries and put them in China because it was cheaper to do that. It was more expensive allowing in the industries in Black America. So they took them out and took it to China, and that made them a lot of money. Now, they're at the point where being in China, having the industries in China is costly. It's expensive. So they have to now take it out from China slowly. They can't do it fastly because they still need stuff coming from China. But they have to now diversify their businesses. So that's one of the reasons why they're taking $55 billion to invest in Africa. It's not free money. It's money that they're gonna invest in Africa, and they're gonna make a lot of money like they did when they deindustrialized Black America in 1970 and took the companies in China by 1979 after making the bilateral trade, where they invested 4 billion and they made over 600 billion. And they've been making a lot of money since after that. So this is a business transaction that they are doing because they have seen that the business that is going on in China is costly, and they have to. You see, this is what African leaders need to do. Business is what controls the world, and even war is business. We need to understand business, learn business, and apply business in our daily lives, because that is what's going to lead all Africans to survive and thrive. Now, but the thing is, the United States is coming to Africa and trying to discuss with African leaders and Africans in general, so that Africans could stop doing business with China. But that is not a good move. That is not a beneficial move for Africa. Africa needs to be a ground where all nations, so long as it benefits Africa, all nations have the right to do business in the continent of Africa. So China has the right to do business in Africa. United States has the right to do business in Africa. But United States wants to use its financial power and its military power and its leadership power in the world to tell Africans not to do business in China, because China is a rivalry to the United States. For us Africans, we need to stand our ground and tell the United States that the United States can do business in Africa. So can China. So can any other nation in the world that wants to do business in Africa. And only Africa and African heads of states can decide on who has to do business and who doesn't have to do business. United States is trying to use the pressure, their power, to make Africa bend. This is a one-time opportunity. This opportunity where US will be doing businesses in Africa. China is doing business in Africa. Russia is doing business in Africa, and Russia has every right to do business in Africa. Don't let the United States use politics, play with words saying that, Russia is bad. No. Russia is as good as the United States is as good for Africa. as China is as good for Africa or bad. It depends on how you look at it. All three nations are good for Africa, and all three nations are also bad for Africa, because there's going to create an intense competition, which is good. And if we as Africans rise to that competition, we will see growth. But if we succumb to what the United States is trying to do in the long run, it will not benefit Africa. Look at how, after colonization, how France uses Africa, how British uses Africa. We have to be intelligent. We have to act wisely in how we do business with the United States, with China, with Russia, and any other nation, so that we as Africans can also benefit from the resources of Africa and from the human resources of Africa. This is King Etchu. Till next time.